Okay, we're really happy that you're here. Okay, go right ahead.
All right, my name is Michael Courtney, and I'm Director of College Counseling at SAR High School in Riverdale, New York. Been there for 16 years. And before that, I worked in admissions at New York University, NYU, where I worked with the College of Arts and Science and the Stern School of Business Committees. And I went to NYU for my undergrad and graduate degrees. So I've actually known Frances for 22 years and very excited to be presenting here alongside her.
Okay, I think we're good with the chat, right? We're good with the group, everyone. We're admitting you. Okay, go right ahead. Okay, you can get started.
Okay, so I'm here to talk about some important things to know about the college admission process. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to pose them in the chat, and I'll get to them later on. So in the meantime, I'm just going to go over some things where I have some things I'll bring up and say, please feel free to type in the chat and answer, as opposed to raising your hand and calling out. So this way it's a bit more interactive. And also, if you want to show your face, feel free. It's always good to see who the people are that I'm talking to, as opposed to a bunch of names. So it'd be good to see some faces too. And here we go. So when it comes to the college admission process, you want to think about what are some factors in considering schools that'll be on your list. So I would say a good thing to start off with is location. Do you want to be in New York City? Do you want to be in New York State? Do you want to go out of state? And you want to think to yourself, when it comes to location, are you thinking of a school that could be urban, suburban, rural, or maybe you'll be happy with any of these? So when it comes to suburban schools, let's start with the middle. Suburban schools are those that are just outside of a big city. So who could think of some examples of suburban schools? And feel free to type them in the chat. Schools that are just outside a big city. Think of maybe schools that are just outside of Manhattan, schools that are just outside of Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. What do you think are examples of suburban schools? Hofstra, very good. Thank you, Julie. What else is out there? Stony Brook, good. So Penn's actually pretty urban. Penn is located really in Philadelphia. It has a beautiful campus, even though it's an urban school. That's a good guess. Swarthmore, very good. So the idea of a suburban school is that it's one that's really within distance of a major city, within an hour, I would say. Binghamton's a little bit tougher because Binghamton isn't so close to a major city. It's a bit more remote, not as remote as, say, Cornell, which is known for being a bit rural. Rutgers is a good example of a suburban school. How about an urban school? A school that's smack in the middle of the city. And when people think of the school, there are not gates there necessarily. It's really enmeshed within the scene. Good, NYU, very good example. BMCC, good. So these are schools that are right in Manhattan, Columbia. So in order for you to go from Columbia to the rest of Manhattan, you're there. It's a quick subway ride downtown. You don't have to take a far along train from outside the city to get in. It's right there. Hunter, good. So New York City has a lot of urban schools. In Philadelphia, that's Drexel, that's Temple, UPenn. In Washington, D.C., it's GW, it's Georgetown, American University. In Boston, you have Boston University, Northeastern. You have a bunch of schools that are really urban, that are enmeshed within the city streets. How about schools that are more remote, a bit more rural? Okay, Penn State's a good example, yes. And I saw Cornell before. Schools that are a bit more distant from a near big city, where it's the only game in town. Cobleskill is a great example. So when it comes to schools, you want to think to yourself, how am I going to narrow down a list of thousands of schools in America to a manageable number? So a good thing to think about could be the location factor. Do I want urban, suburban, or rural? Do I want to be in New York or out of New York? When it comes to in-state, out-of-state, you might be thinking public versus private. So New York actually has two different systems for public. We have the CUNY system, which includes the 5 boroughs of the public schools. So that's Baruch and Queens and Hunter, City College, Brooklyn, etc. We also have the Suny Schools. So Suny Schools could be Binghamton, Geneseo, Albany, Stony Brook, Buffalo. And then you might have public schools that are out of New York. So Rutgers, Wisconsin, Michigan, Maryland are good examples. How it works is the public schools are definitely the cheapest because they are funding you for in-state, especially if you're in New York. If you want to go to an out-of-state public, that'll be quite a bit pricier than an in-state public. The highest sticker price is for the private schools. However, private schools might have the most funding to make themselves cheaper than an out-of-state public. So a school like Boston University, the sticker price is $82,000. They could give a financial aid package that'll be larger than one that you might get from University of Connecticut. So even though the school is a lot more expensive sticker price, based on your family's financial information, BU can be cheaper in theory than an out-of-state public. So you want to think about also your family dynamics when it comes to in-state, out-of-state, public, private, and then public in-state, such as CUNY or SUNY, or out-of-state publics. When thinking about colleges, you want to consider the size of the school as well. So typically a school that's small is considered 5,000 or fewer undergraduates. So not talking about graduate students, just the college students. Medium size would be 5 to 10,000, and large would be 10,000 or more. So examples of smaller schools under 5,000 college students typically could be a small liberal arts college, Amherst, Williams, Swarthmore, Bowdoin. Medium size could be Emory, Washington University in St. Louis, and larger very often will be the large privates like University of Miami. Miami's about a little over 10,000, NYU, Boston University, as well as state schools. So Binghamton, Buffalo, Albany, these are larger universities. So size might be an important factor to consider when thinking about what you're looking for out of colleges. The most important reason you're going to school is for academics. So you want to make sure the schools you're interested in have the different majors that you're considering. So just about all colleges out there will have the liberal arts, things like psychology, English, history. They also will have the liberal arts that could be humanities, social sciences, natural sciences, mathematics. But what's unique about schools is some might have a special engineering school or a business school or a nursing school. So when thinking about your college list, if you have a specialized interest, you have to make sure the university that you're considering actually possesses those departments. So I remember when I used to work in admissions at NYU, people would say sometimes, I really want to go to NYU to study fashion. NYU didn't have fashion. So it's very hard to say to someone, we're not the right school for you if this is your career choice you're really aspiring towards. So you want to think about the major and the schools that you're considering if that's the right fit. When it comes to these institutions, you also want to think about the schools within the university. So what do I mean? A school like NYU has a College of Arts and Science, it has a Stern School of Business, it has Tannen School of Engineering, like I mentioned those, also has a College of Nursing, but it also has some specialized programs like the Gallatin School of Individualized Study, where you can create your own concentration. And it has very niche programs like a real estate program, sports management, hotel management, which is called hospitality and tourism. A lot of schools will have these very interesting niche programs that could be of interest to you, even though you've never necessarily studied this on the high school level. So Cornell, for example, has an architecture and planning school. Maybe you never taken architecture, but it is a field that could be of interest to you based on summer work that you've done or an internship you've had. Or schools that might have certain programs like at BU, the Sargent College for Rehabilitation Health Sciences. So very unique programs in the health sciences. BU has that. So these are things to think about when it comes to schools, the academics. You also will look within schools if they have certain requirements. Maybe there's a core curriculum where everyone has particular classes that they have to take within their first 2 years typically. You might have something called distribution requirements. Maybe you have to take one class from philosophy and one class from world history and one class from expository writing, and you could choose which ones you want from within those realms. Or a school like Brown in Providence, Rhode Island has an open curriculum where you actually don't have any required classes. Johns Hopkins also is known for being a bit more open. Conversely, a school like Columbia has a pretty structured core that's been around for 100 years and that all alumni together are taking. So alumni and undergraduates, so students together have this really unified academic atmosphere at Columbia because they've all taken these same required core classes. So when it comes to colleges, you'll see a lot of things that might excite you. Maybe it's Greek life, fraternities, sororities. Maybe it's student organizations that captivate your interests. Maybe it's the location or size. But the first thing to think about is academics. You're paying tuition for an education, and the rest of the experience is the cherry on top. Now, a really important thing to think about with college admission process are the different terms you have to consider. So let's quiz you guys a little bit. Who could tell me what is early action? Who has heard of that before, and what does that mean? Feel free to type in the chat.
I just want to remind all of you who are listening in the backdrop, and I'll go off the video. Hello. I just want to remind all of you to go and please make sure that you are productive and typing productively in the chat. because we are, recording and holding the transcription. And I just want to remind you that on the back end, we see who you are, and we really want to make sure that you're participating in the chat. So please reply. What was the question?
Who could tell me what early action means? Okay, I see someone, Selena wrote ED, early decision, is a binding agreement. So early action means you're applying typically by around November 1st. That's a deadline for most. Most schools that have early action are public. There are some privates that are out there as well, but most are public. And what happens is you apply by an earlier deadline, you find out a bit earlier than you would in regular decision. But if admitted, it's non-binding, which means you don't have to go. You have until May 1st to determine if it's the right place for you. So early action allows you to actually compare financial aid packages, compare acceptance offers to see if that's the right school for you. Okay, so early action, if you're applying to state schools, Binghamton, Albany, out-of-state schools, Rutgers, Wisconsin, Indiana, University of Illinois, it's a good idea to hit that November 1st deadline to give you a better chance of getting in. So early action is one thing. Then early decision, someone wrote, is binding. So early decision, for the most part, is private institutions. And you're saying to them, if you offer me admission, I'm definitely coming. So early decision means you apply by November 1st. You typically find out mid-December, whereas early action could be anywhere from mid-December to late January, depending on the school. An early decision, you're competing with a smaller applicant pool than you would in regular decision. NYU is an example of a school that has early decision. So early decision means you're saying, if admitted, I'm coming here. So if you need to compare financial aid packages, you need to compare multiple acceptances to determine where you want to go, then early decision is not for you. So the strategy is, why would someone apply early decision if you don't have these choices? Because your chances are better. The acceptance rate for the vast majority of schools is stronger for students who apply early decision. So early decision means you've done all your research before November 1st of senior year, knowing which school is the right fit, and tends to be the private schools. Some schools have something called early decision 2, which is a second round of early decision. So whereas ED1 was a November 1st deadline, ED2 tends to be around January 1st. You find out in early to mid-February, as opposed to end of March. And if admitted, it's binding. However, for most schools, early decision 1, though it might be selective, early decision 2 is a bit more selective. And then regular is considerably more selective. Examples of schools that have ED2 are basically a lot of the private schools that are not in the Ivy League. So University of Chicago, Washington University in St. Louis, Johns Hopkins, Carnegie Mellon, Emory, Brandeis, Vanderbilt. These are examples of schools that have a second round of early decision. So you can only apply to one school ED1. If you're admitted, you're done with the admission process. It's exciting. If you are denied, you move on. You also could be deferred from the early decision round to the regular decision rounds, where they want to consider your candidacy within the much larger pool of applicants. So I tell my students that if you're deferred from ED, you can emotionally move on, but you might want to have a thread of hope. Still a possibility with strong first semester grades, an update letter, but you might want to think about an early decision 2 school if you're deferred from somewhere in early decision 1 to have a better chance elsewhere in the next round of the admission process. The public schools tend to have either early action, such as I mentioned before, Binghamton, Albany, or the CUNY schools will have rolling admission, where the earlier you apply, the earlier you find out. And for a lot of schools that have rolling admission, your chances might be better. So if you apply to CUNY in November, you have a better chance than if you apply in February, where spots have already filled up. So CUNY allows you to apply to up to 6 schools using their one CUNY application. So for the CUNY fee at $65, you can apply to Baruch, City College, Lehman, CSI, Queens, whichever 6 you want. You could be admitted to all 6. You could be admitted to 4 of them, 2 of them, or none of them, and they'll refer you to a community college within their 4-year schools to start with 2 years, and then you can go to 4 years after. Or in the CUNY application, you can actually list 1 or 2 community colleges if you'd like. So when it comes to the SUNY system, some SUNY schools are on this thing called the Common Application. The Common Application is the vehicle that allows you to apply online to many schools at once using one generic form. So you only have to write an essay once and it can go out to many schools. The Common App consists of a lot of private schools and also a lot of public schools, but there are some exceptions. CUNY has its own university system. SUNY has its own university application system as well, such as FIT is only on the SUNY application. But Binghamton and Albany and Buffalo, though they are SUNY schools and they're on the SUNY application vehicle, they're also on the Common App. So if you want to apply to SUNY schools and some other private schools or public schools that are on Common App, you could do that. And you don't have to separately do a SUNY application. When it comes to admission terms, you also should know something called restrictive early action. That is something that Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Stanford have, where you apply by November 1st. But if offered admission, it's not binding. The restriction is you cannot do that and an early decision. So you can't say I want to apply to Harvard restrictive early action and NYU early decision. You have to choose one or the other if you're going to do an early application. Okay, so we have early decision 2, early action, rolling admission, restrictive early action, and the most common form of applying to schools is regular decision. So regular decision is going to be the larger applicant pool for all these different colleges. So even though schools might have ED1, ED2, they're still taking a big chunk of their class through regular decision. So let's give you a thinking question. Who could tell me why they think early decision 2 might be more competitive than early decision 1? Why is it harder to get into U Chicago in ED2 than it would be in ED1? And feel free to type in the chat. I'm seeing a lot of questions here also. I'll definitely get to those questions. Okay, I'll give it another second to see if you guys want to answer. Okay, so someone messaged me, is the amount of applicants, is it a bigger pool? Typically, no. Very often ED1 is just as large, if not larger. But who's applying to U Chicago in ED2? The quality of the applicant could be stronger. It could be a kid who maybe didn't get into Columbia or Yale. They don't want to risk waiting out regular decision at these very highly selective schools. So a school like Washington University in St. Louis, their regular decision pool is very, very, very strong. And to get in regular is extremely competitive. But ED2 is also selective because the quality of applicant might be kids who didn't get in early to Penn, for example. So ED1 gives you a little bit of a leg up. Okay. Within CUNY, there is the Macaulay Honors Program, and Macaulay Honors is the college that is the Macaulay Honors College that is within a certain campus. So you do Macaulay Honors College first choice at Baruch or first choice at Queens, and they tend to pay more attention to your first choice that you list. That's a November 16th deadline, and by applying for Macaulay Honors, you'll be considered for either that program or maybe a scholars group within campus if you're not as strong for Macaulay, but you're still a really competitive candidate. And if not that, then definitely general admission. You don't have to do multiple CUNY applications if you're applying to the Macaulay Honors College. So CUNY has an honors college, and a lot of state schools, Binghamton, Maryland, will also have honors programs, Rutgers, that will enable you to feel like you're in a smaller cohort within this much larger undergraduate population. Okay, so next thing I want to talk about, what are admission officers looking for? There are a lot of things out there. There are a lot of myths out there. What are some truths as to what's important in the admission process? The most important thing they look at, the first thing, the thing they care about the most is your transcript. So that is your collection of courses in years 9 through 12 and grades in years 9 through 11. So when you apply to colleges, they're going to see all of your classes you've taken. They might prioritize English, history, math, science, and foreign language, yet they'll still see your fine arts, physical education, journalism, any other electives you've taken. It's still visible on the transcript. And they note a bunch of things. They're looking to see, is there consistency there? Or maybe there's an upward trend. Maybe you didn't start off as strong freshman year and you got more mature, academically mature, and you did better and better. Or maybe 9th grade was really strong, it went down in 10th grade, and maybe you provide an explanation. Maybe you had to have surgery that year, or maybe a family member was ill or passed away. So the idea is that they want to know the story, and the transcript is the initial part of the application that tells your academic story. So colleges are looking to see that you are taking English, history, math, science, foreign language, Those are the 5 academic majors that mean the most to them. They're looking to see your tracking. Are you taking them at the highest level, maybe AP classes, honors, accelerated, or grade level? They're looking to see the type of rigor their curriculum entails. They're looking to see that you're doing really well throughout your 3 years. And some schools, if you're applying early decision, might ask for your first quarter grades of senior year. How are you doing those first 2 months of senior year? Everywhere you apply will get your first semester transcript of senior year. So even if you're admitted to a school in mid-December, your counselor will still send your senior year transcript with those grades. And then wherever you ultimately enroll, that college will get your final transcript. So senior year grades definitely matter. But when it comes to the admission process, grades 9 through 11 matter a bit more, especially 11th grade, and to see where you are in terms of preparation for college. So that transcript is really the first thing that's going to make a dent in your application process. Alongside the transcript, pre-COVID would be standardized testing. So that's SAT or ACT. In recent years, because COVID caused many test centers to close, SAT, ACT has been optional for the majority of schools. MIT actually this year went back to requiring testing. The University of Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee public school systems require it, but otherwise schools for the most part are test optional. So that means very high scores can still impress them. But if your scores aren't as strong as what the school might be looking for, you can withhold those scores. And the admission process will entail looking at the other factors with greater weight. So when it comes to the admission process and testing, every school will reveal on their website what their middle 50% rate is for admitted students for SAT and ACT. So if you just Google any random school, let's say you Google Emory University, middle 50%, SAT, ACT, they'll tell you where the students fall within the testing range. Emory, I know by heart, is a 33 to 35 out of 36 on the ACT. So what is that telling you? For a middle 50%, that means 25% of admitted students have a 36. 25% have below a 33, and 50% are in a 33 to 35 ACT range. So that tells you testing's pretty high. If you have a 26, but everything else about your profile is extraordinary, you'd withhold that score, don't send it, and let Emory Admissions Committee judge you based on your transcript and everything else we'll talk about, essays, activities, recommendation letters. So standardized testing is important in the sense that if you do very well, that could still help your candidacy, but it's also not as important in that if you don't do well or you don't want to prep for it at all, they'll prioritize other elements of your application with greater weight. So after transcript and testing, there's not necessarily a defined line, what's next most important, what's third, what's fourth, what's fifth, what's sixth. Different schools might have different ways to review applications. I would tell you that extracurricular activities is given a lot of weight. And the activities list, the Common App lets you actually input 10 different activities. It could be in school, out of school, during the school year or summer. And you don't have to put 10. If you have 7, that's great too. They're looking more for the quality than the quantity. They're looking to see that you're involved in a few commitments multiple years, and they're looking to see, they actually ask you how many hours per week and weeks per year you're committed to these endeavors. So when it comes to your extra,
I'm so sorry to interrupt you really quickly. I want to just remind the group, Michael, is that okay? I'm going to do that just for 1 minute, okay? I just want to give the group a reminder, okay? I would like to take everyone and just remind you that Mr. Michael Courtney is doing us a gigantic favor to be here today, to take this time today. And I also sent you a thank you, Michael, earlier. Check your phone in the text to say thank you. I just want to remind all of you that he's here right now doing us a huge favor from, to be truth be told, from, his private home during his off hours. And this is also a major Jewish holiday week. So please keep that in mind as well. I just want to make sure everyone is paying attention to every single word he says, because, we also have in the background families and lives at night, and we're making everything work for the webinar. I just want to make sure that we have your full, undivided attention. So everyone, please make sure that you're paying great attention to everything that Mr. Michael Courtney is telling us right now. And I just want to share that with you. Okay, everyone, do not forget the value of this golden wisdom and expert advice that we're getting. Make sure that you are avoiding multitasking and pay attention.
okay. So when it comes to extracurricular activities, sometimes people will ask which activities most impress the colleges. There's no magic formula that if I do theater, I get in, or if I do athletics, I get in, or if I do publications. Sometimes people will think I have to have this, that, and I have to be completely well-rounded. That's not the case. They're looking to see what are the endeavors that really are important to you. Do you have leadership positions, perhaps in a couple of them? Have you encouraged yourself to be involved multiple hours a week and weeks per year, and not just something freshman year for 1 hour and then it's one and done? And there's no set thing to think about if you have a job or if you have family responsibilities that preclude activities that you're in trouble. Colleges actually list within the pull down menu, do you have family responsibilities? If you are helping take care of a grandparent who lives with you, that's something admission committees want to know. If you have a part-time job 10 hours a week to help support your family income, that's something that admission offices are very impressed with. So you shouldn't think I'm not in every club in school, I'm in trouble. It's not like that. They're looking to see what are your interests and how do you pursue them. And they're looking to see that basically you're not just playing video games all day, every day. So if you're someone who likes to go biking, even if there's not a biking club in your school, you let them know that. If you're someone who is a runner, maybe you've done 10K, half marathon, marathon, even if it's not within your school's activity list, that's okay as well. So when it comes to extracurricular activities, you want to think, how are you going to be able to promote yourself in a way that's going to show that you're someone desirable on campus? When I was at NYU, I'll never forget one year, I had a student who had a real blank activity list. And the only thing he had was 10th grade, 35 hours a week, girlfriend. So having a girlfriend and committing to her for 35 hours a week, that's not exactly what they're looking for. There should be other things that people are involved with throughout their 4 years of high school. College admission folks are also pretty intelligent. They'll know if senior year, all of a sudden you've joined 8 clubs and you weren't part of anything your first 3 years, that you're just trying to boost your resume for college admission purposes. You're not all of a sudden passionate about 8 different things in senior year that you had nothing to do with in your first 3 years. So multi-year commitments are important. Colleges are looking also at your summers. And again, there's no golden key to getting into college based on a certain summer program. What I will say is that for certain fields, let's say you want to go into engineering, being able to showcase an interest in engineering beyond being just good in math and science can help your candidacy. So maybe it's in school, if there's a robotics team, or if there is an engineering club, but maybe it's a summer program of some kind. Or maybe if you shadow an engineer, that's something to think about also. If you have a particular major in mind, to cultivate your interest in that field. So Cornell, for example, has a hotel management program. If you were able to work in the hospitality sector in some capacity in high school, the summers might be a good time. That could help your chances of getting into such a niche major. Next program to talk about, so we spoke about transcript, testing, and extracurricular activities, is recommendation letter or recommendation letters. A lot of schools will allow for 2 teachers and 1 school official, which could be your college counselor. And the recommendation letters should be from teachers who've gotten to know you well within the classroom. So it's not just a teacher who you say hi to a lot in the hallways. It's someone who could talk about your academic strengths. And maybe it's a class that first semester you got a B and second semester an A, and colleges will see that upward improvement. The ideal, I would say, should be from classes where you got a B+ or better. A B is fine if you work really hard for that B, and schools see that you really try to achieve as best you can. Like I mentioned engineering before, if you're thinking of that particular field, it's a good idea to have a math or science recommendation letter as well. So the recommendation letters ideally should come from English, history, math, science, foreign language, 2 from within those 5. It shouldn't be 2 English or 2 math. So it could be 1 English, 1 history. It could be 1 English, 1 math, 1 science, and 1 foreign language, any combo. And when it comes to recommendation letters, colleges aren't looking for a plethora of them. You shouldn't think, I need to send them 7 recommendation letters. That'll help my chances. They don't care. 2 teacher letters and the 1 school official. If you want to give them 1 supplemental recommendation letter from someone outside of the school, maybe you have a job supervisor, maybe you did research and you want to have the lab employer write a recommendation letter. If you did internship with a political campaign, the politician wants to write for you, or the campaign manager, that could be helpful as well, but it's not the end all be all. It's not at all a requirement. So after recommendation letters, we should talk about the writing pieces, the essays. So colleges have something called a personal statement, and many schools it's a requirement. CUNY, it's actually optional. unless you're applying to the Macaulay Honors College, in which case there are 2 required essays. And the essay is your personal statement. It's something about you. So the Common App actually lists a bunch of prompts, and you could choose one of those prompts or do topic of your choice. The idea is that you're not writing about how special your grandma is, and they know nothing about you. So if it's about a relationship with the family member, it all has to come back to you and what's your story within that essay. I like the idea of having a flashy opening sentence that leads the admission reviewer to actually read the entire essay and not just skim it. A flashy sentence to start, to then have a really strong opening paragraph is a good idea. It's not like an English paper where you have intro, body, conclusion. It doesn't have to be that way. You do have creative license in how you want to write it. But the idea is that a great opening to really get their attention and rope them in is advisable. When it comes to the essay, some people are going to fret over this for months and months and months. It doesn't have to be that way. You don't want to show it to everyone in your ecosystem. Show it to an English teacher, show it to your school counselor. That's all you need. If you're going to show it to all your friends, all your family members, you're going to get dozens of opinions, and it might drive you up the wall. So when it comes to the personal statement, you might want to brainstorm ideas and outline them and then draft them. It's very hard to just write 600 words in one night and get it done completely. There's going to be drafting, and it's going to be frustrating at times if you feel like you have writer's block or you're just not getting in the flow of things as much as you'd like, but it's not meant to be done the night before. In addition to the essay, a number of colleges have requirements called supplemental essays. So whereas the essay is one generic personal statement that'll work for a bunch of schools, a lot of colleges will have supplemental essays, which means that these are statements specifically for that college. So it might be, why do you want to go to X university? Or why do you want to major in X? Or tell us about a community you're from and why that's important to you. Or write about an extracurricular activity and what it means to you. So these are examples of different types of supplemental essays. Some of them could be shorter. Some have write a letter to your roommate. What do you want your college roommate to know about you? Brown this year had a new one. What is something that brings you joy? So the idea is that these supplemental essays are just as, if not even more important than the actual personal statement, because colleges want to know if you're a good fit for their school and their culture based on the research that you've done on them and that you understand their mission and their values. So the essay pieces, again, is one personal statement, and the Common App essay that you might be doing will also work for CUNY. Even though CUNY is optional, if you have an essay already done because you're doing it for other schools, great, submit it for CUNY as well. SUNY, Binghamton, Albany, Buffalo, Stony Brook, these schools also will look at the Common App essay as a part of the admission process. Other things to look for when it comes to the admission process. So we have transcript, testing, activities, recommendation letters, essays. Some schools offer an optional interview. Typically, it's private schools that might not have humongous applicant pools. NYU does not offer any interviews. And the interview is not going to get you in if your grades are far below the profile of an admitted student. So if you are a C student and you think, I'm going to get into Harvard because I'm going to blow them away with the interview, you're not. The idea is that you still have to be on the cusp of admission, and a really strong interview gets written up in your file. It could be an interview with an alum. It could be an interview with a senior who works in the admissions office. Some schools do that. And when it comes to the interview, they want to see a side of you that also they maybe wouldn't see in the application. So the interview really wants to showcase if you're going to be a good student in the classroom and a good floor mate on your floor and a good roommate within the residence hall if you choose to live in housing. So the interview is also part of the process. There are things that schools consider, something called demonstrated interest. This is more of a private school phenomenon, and a lot of private schools are getting away from it during COVID, where schools want to know if they admit you, is there a chance, especially in regular decision, is there a chance you'll enroll? So demonstrated interest means, have you joined the mailing list for that school? Have you gone to campus for information session, campus tour? Have you done the optional interview? Have you gone to the session at your high school when the admissions representative came to meet with interested students? So these are different pieces that could go into demonstrated interest. Also, with the admission process, some students might be recruited athletes, and that gives them an edge for certain schools if they have the parameters to meet the admission criteria. You might be a recruited musician. There are oboe players out there. Sometimes there's a shortage of oboe players in the band in some schools. So they look at these different considerations. They look at geography. If you are from New York and you apply to a school in Idaho or Montana, you might be more geographically diverse than if you apply from the Pacific Northwest. Same is reverse. If you're from Idaho or Montana and you apply to a school in the Northeast, you're considered geographically diverse. So schools will look at all these different considerations in a holistic review of your application. So when it comes to the admission process, it's important to know that you might have some dream schools out there, but there's a lot more than one school out there where you can be successful. And I try to tell my students that to have the blinders on to all the colleges and only have your eyes set on one school could lead to disappointment. So it should be that if you don't get into a school early decision, there are other schools out there that excite you. And you might make a list of schools that are reaches, that are targets, and that are foundations. So what is a reach school? What do you think that means?
And Michael, while they're typing into the chat, I just want to remind everyone to pay careful attention. And because we were starting the webinar, I just want, and by the way, a lot of people joined around 7:10. So I just want to take a minute, if you can just reintroduce yourself and your expertise to the group so that everyone knows. And I want to remind all of you to pay careful attention, because I was actually just about to comment on this. Today is a major, Jewish holiday week, which actually both Michael and myself observed, and we have little kids in the background. So I just want to make sure that everyone's at extremely high attention spans right now and paying careful attention to this webinar, because Michael is, quite soft-spoken, but he is an expert in the field. And thank you so much for doing this on such a special, evening and a weeknight. And I just want to remind everyone to not, multitask, because this is very valuable information that is being presented very clearly to you. Please don't take this moment for granted. We're extremely fortunate. With that being said, Michael, a lot of families did join around 7:10. Some joined 7:15. Can you just quickly reintroduce yourself and your expertise, and then you'll continue from that point on, and then you'll be able to close the webinar once you feel ready. If you want it to run 8:15 or 8 after that, you're welcome to do that, because you'll be able to close it up yourself as well. I just want to take a moment, just if you could reintroduce yourself for everyone who joined late.
Sure. So my name is Michael Courtney. I'm Director of College Counseling at SAR High School, which is a private school in Riverdale. And I've been there 16 years. And prior to that, I worked in admissions at NYU. And I was there for my undergraduate and graduate school degrees, as well as working there full-time for 3 years after college. And I grew up in Florida, in Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale. If any Dolphin fans are out there, you're my people. Okay, so I want to go into questions. I see a lot of questions here over the night, so I want to be able to address them. And if more questions pop up, you are welcome to type them in. So someone asked me a question: which colleges are better than others? Which I think is a very fair question. You're going to see a lot of different rankings out there: US News World Report, Forbes, Wall Street Journal. The rankings, there are different criteria that they use, but for the most part, you have to know if a school is the right fit for you, where you can thrive academically, socially, in terms of your extracurriculars, in terms of your perhaps religious observance. These are all different things that matter to these schools. So when it comes to which schools are better than others, you'll see different rankings, and sometimes people construe selectivity to mean higher quality. So if some school doesn't want me, that means they must be really good. Not really such a good way to look at it, but there are some schools out there might have higher placement rates into medical school if you're thinking of pre-med, or higher placement rates into law school if you're thinking of going into law. That's what should matter to you. Or if there are certain schools where businesses come to recruit on campus, if you're thinking of going into finance or management or marketing. So those are things that are important to consider when it comes to schools, to know which ones are better than others. I would say you don't want to go into significant debt for an undergraduate degree, because your terminal degree matters the most. So if you want to take out bigger loans for med school one day, law school, I can appreciate that more than for undergrad. The federal government recommendation is no more than $18,000 after 4 years. So it's not $18,000 a year. You shouldn't be in debt $72,000. But if you take out loans up to the point of $4,000 or $5,000 a year, that's fair. Next, other questions I have here: what do you do with a sophomore who has no idea or interest in what they want to do for a major, or perhaps even attend college? So attending college, it's not for everyone, right? If you know you want to go into a vocational program, welding, plumbing, auto mechanic, these are different fields that you could do very well in. But the idea of college is that if you want to explore academic opportunities out there, even if you're undecided on a major, most Americans are undecided, or most Americans will think they know what they want to do and they change their minds. So it's totally okay not to have an exact idea of major you want to pursue. But college is really a good place for 4 years to actually explore many interests you might have, meet people of very varied backgrounds. And typically by the end of sophomore year, students have an idea of the degree they want to pursue. So based on taking intro level classes, based on core curricular requirements, they know what field they want to go into. You might not know your career at the start of your senior year of college, and that's okay. Students might change their careers a few times after they graduate college. You might go to graduate school for one thing and then go into a field totally different than the graduate degree that you have. That happens as well. So the American system sets it up so that you don't have to have a defined career at age 16. Next question about okay, so what if you're in a special music program and you don't have language class, instead you have music classes instead? It's an interesting question. So some students might not have foreign language because of certain learning challenges, for example, or maybe you're doing a certain music program or arts program. So that's something that you would explain to colleges, and hopefully your school counselor will also explain that when it comes to the recommendation letter. Very good question. Other questions here. Do you have to make a new essay for each college? So there is the one essay, also called a personal statement, that'll work for many schools that could be on your list. But a number of schools might have a supplemental essay or essays. A lot of the very selective schools especially will have supplemental essays. From the state schools like Binghamton, Albany, they do not have supplemental essays. So doing that one Common App essay will work for that school without having to do additional ones. Okay. Question, what is your best advice for choosing an essay topic if you're stuck? That's a really good question. So sometimes people don't know what to write because they think, okay, I'm supposed to write about myself. Where do I go? I would say look at the prompts. They are extremely pointed. I'm going to pull them up for you so you can have access to it. I'll share the screen with you guys. So the Common App essay prompts are extremely specific. So for example, number one is pretty generic about background, identity, interest, talent that you have. But then they have a question about how you have taken lessons taken from obstacles. So maybe there's a time that you failed, or you had a challenge or setback, a time you challenged a belief or idea, something that someone has done for you to make you happy or thankful. So these are very, very pointed questions, so that you shouldn't feel like you're starting from out of nowhere when it comes to the college essay. I'm going to put this link in the chat so you guys have the opportunity to check it out later if you'd like. Okay, next question. Is ED2 better than regular decision? So ED2 is going to be less selective than regular decision, which means your chances to stand out are stronger in a pool of, say, a few thousand applicants over, say, 30,000 applicants. So the idea is that early decision 1 could be selective at a number of schools. Early decision 2 will be a little bit more selective. And then regular decision is a whole other level of competitiveness. Okay, next question. Are top 25 colleges much, much harder today than 20 years ago? If yes, what do you think is driving that? And do you think it will become more or less selective going forward? So yes, colleges are more selective than they've ever been. And because the application numbers keep growing every year, they're getting more and more selective. Why is that? It's a lot easier now to apply to many schools at once using this common application. Parents in the room, you may have remembered typing, like typewriter, your college application, and maybe that threw you off from doing 5 or more schools. Now, if you want to apply to 15 schools, it's relatively easy, especially if they don't have supplemental essays. So the application numbers have swelled. In a test optional landscape, it also might be more competitive if you don't have testing to stand out. If you have very, very strong testing, that could be helpful though. Okay, so I'm happy to take other questions. I've addressed all the questions I see here so far. What else is on your minds? The other thing I'll say from before about early action is you can apply to multiple schools in early action. It's only early decision where you can apply to one school. So you can apply to Early Action Binghamton and UMass Amherst and University of Vermont and University of Delaware. But early decision means you're only doing one school. Now, let's say you want to apply to NYU Early Decision. You can do that and do early action schools. But if you're admitted to your early decision school, let's say NYU admits you in mid-December, then you withdraw your other applications. Okay, got some questions here. Is it bad to only have two colleges that you really want to attend? So my answer to that is this. If these are schools that are foundation schools for you, where you know almost for certain that you'll get in, then that's great. If these are schools that are targets or reaches, then you have to do more research and discover what else is out there, so they're not left hanging without a college that you're really excited about. Got a question, what about grades? So grades are important. That's part of the transcript. So your school grades are going to be the first thing that admission officers are looking at. Question, what's the process of applying to med school? So when you're applying to med school, you might be applying in your senior year of college, or you might be applying after 1 or 2 years of doing research after you graduate college. That'll entail having really strong college GPA, taking prerequisite classes like bio, chem, organic chemistry, physics, calculus, statistics. And you can have a pre-med track, but not be a science major. You could be a pre-med track and be a bio major, or you could be a pre-med track and be a sociology major. You have that flexibility. They're also going to look to see if you've done research, internships, are you involved in student organizations and leadership positions, and they look at recommendation letters. And they also have the MCAT, which is the entrance exam for medical schools. Is religion too much of a controversial topic to write about in a personal essay? That's a great question. It is definitely okay for you to belong to a religion and to write about that. You shouldn't feel that colleges aren't going to like me because they don't like this religion. But what you should think about is, are you someone who's open-minded to other people? Or are you someone who comes across as only valuing their own religion and your own space within that, and not other people of diverse backgrounds? Any thoughts on IB program school? What do colleges think about IB? So the International Baccalaureate program is construed as basically equivalent to APs. And you might be taking higher level classes and standard level classes, and they're looking to see that you're taking classes at these levels within English, history, math, science, foreign language. That will impress them most. And colleges are valuing these just as much as they would APs or other college classes you might be taking in high school. Can I talk about students' finances to be one of the factors about their admission? That's a great question. So admission offices and financial aid offices are separate. An admission officer doesn't have access to the financial aid paperwork. So a lot of schools out there are need blind, which means they won't even look at any finances when determining if they're going to make an admission decision. What happens is some schools might be need aware, and they might take that into consideration if, say, you're on the wait list, for example, and maybe they need more full pays to help make their target tuition goals. But when it comes to the admission process, finances aren't going to be a reason that you're admitted or not. However, colleges do note students who might be first generation college students, or there might be students who are who have multiple passports. You might belong to dual citizenship. These are things that they're going to note. When it comes to the finances, students are able to work together with their parents in filing the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. And that's something that goes to all the colleges you're applying to if you want them to consider you for financial aid. Separate from that, a number of schools require something called a CSS profile, and the CSS profile can be found on the College Board website. Other schools might have their own requirements separate from FAFSA or CSS. Next question. What is a penalty for not accepting an offer for an early decision school? The only reason to not accept an offer for an ED school is if you're expecting a certain financial aid package and they didn't come close to meeting it. Now you might wonder, how am I supposed to know what financial aid package to expect? Prior to applying, parents, this is good to listen up. There is something called the net price calculator that's available on the financial aid websites of all the schools that you're considering. And the net price calculator is something parents can work on tonight. Look at their income figures from last year, plug it into the net price calculator, and that college financial aid office will tell you what your aid package might look like based on that net price calculator. So let's say, based on filling that out, you apply to a school early, and it looks like the school will give you $20,000 of aid. and then you're admitted early decision and they give you 3,000. That's a really big gap, and you could pull out of ED. You can't pull out just because, you know what, I don't want to go there anymore. Or, you know what, they said 20,000, they gave me 19,000, can't make it work. Because you can actually appeal for more financial aid. And typically they'll give you more, a couple thousand. They're not going to give you more to 17,000. Okay. Can we know the total yearly cost of NYU for ED after aid before we apply for ED? So that's a net price calculator. The schools that are really, really pricey, something to think about also is if you want to live in housing, you actually can make it cheaper by living in a triple, for example. So it's 3 people to a room instead of 2. Or a lot of schools might have non-air conditioned dorms. And that sounds terrible in the summer, but college is September through May. So it might be a little bit tougher in September and May, but October to April, it's going to be cold. You can also be a residential assistant, which means that you're actually working throughout the year as the floor representative, and you might get housing and also meals for free if you do that. So these are things to think about. Next question, are recommendation letters really necessary to get into a college? Great question. For the schools that do holistic review, which means they look at every single thing that's going to be part of your admission portfolio, yes, they're very important. Some schools don't require recommendation letters. Those schools, it's not going to matter as much. The other thing to think about is if you're applying to artistic programs, so if you're applying for theater, for example, the audition will carry weight. Or if you're applying to portfolio programs, studio art, for example, film, dramatic writing, these portfolios will matter also, just like the academic pieces I mentioned. So question here, is early decision the easiest to get into? So early decision, though it might still be selective at a lot of schools, it's definitely a better chance than early decision 2 or regular decision. Can I please explain early action again? Yes, that means you apply at an earlier deadline, typically November 1st. And if offered admission, you're not bound to go. You still have until May 1st to weigh all your offers before deciding where to enroll. And you can apply to multiple schools early action. You can only apply to one school in early decision 1. If not admitted to that school, you could do one school in early decision 2. If you're deferred from early decision 2 to regular decision, is it still binding? No, if you're admitted somehow after being deferred, then it's not binding and you have a choice of where you want to matriculate. That's a great question. If I do ED1, can I do ED2? Yes, if you apply ED1 and you're deferred or denied admission, you could definitely do ED2 to a different school. If you get into your ED1 school, you withdraw all your other applications and you're done with the admission process. Is it bad to ask a sophomore year teacher for recommendation if you have a good relationship with them? That's a great question. Barnard prefers not a sophomore year teacher, they prefer junior year. All other schools that I work with are okay with it. So if you want to do one sophomore, one junior, that's great, or 2 junior year teachers. It shouldn't be 2 sophomore teachers and it shouldn't be a freshman teacher. Do colleges have some special consideration for minorities or immigrant families? So colleges are looking to fulfill their own institutional puzzle, which means that they might have certain types of numbers they're looking for to make it work for what their constellation is. So they might say, we need to have 2 more quarterbacks in this year's class. We need to have 2 more small forwards. There's no way for us, the general public, to know what exactly all their institutional needs are, but that is something they're thinking of when they're fulfilling their class puzzle. So they are looking for certain types of populations to make them more diverse. They are looking for students who might come from immigrant families or might have dual citizenship. These are pieces that give them a bit more of a diverse, heterogeneous background. And that is the ideal for having people meet other people and establishing really strong bonds for decades to come. What is the process of applying to law school? So if you're thinking pre-law, there's no list of classes you have to take to get into law school the way there is for medical school. So pre-law, very often students might take some writing intensive classes, argumentative types of classes, public speaking perhaps, for example, and you're applying with your college transcript, your LSAT, which is a law school entrance exam, and like with medical school, student organizations, leadership positions, internships, maybe even research. Next question, what would lead to a college revoking your acceptance by the end of senior year? Great question. They might revoke your acceptance if perhaps they see a significant dip in your grades from when you were first submitted. They might revoke if they catch you posting something unsavory on the internet. And guys, anything you post on the internet, social media, it's there forever. So be very careful. I know Francis is a big proponent of kids who work with Kweller Prep not having social media for those months, and I totally subscribe to that. Be very careful what you post. So that could cause them to revoke your acceptance. When should you write an essay to colleges? So you want to write that essay before you apply, before you submit, and it might take a couple of weeks to work on it. It shouldn't be done the night before. How can we find scholarships that will fit our needs? I'm going to give you a great website that I use with my students. It's called Going Merry. I'm going to put it in the chat. This is almost like a common app for scholarships. And I have all my students do Going Merry. It's really wonderful. There are other scholarship websites out there. Just so you know, any scholarship website that asks you to pay to join is a scam. Next question. When do you apply to colleges? My son is in 11th grade now. You apply senior year, either by November 1st for any of the earlier deadlines. I have 2 students applying to UNC Chapel Hill. That's actually October 15th. That's tomorrow. But for the most part, it's November 1st, November 15th for earlier deadlines, or January 1st for ED2 or regular decision. What is the total cost of Queens College? So the CUNY schools, as in-state students, will be significantly cheaper. So tuition tends to be around $7,000. Now, whether you do housing is up to you. So some CUNY schools will have housing. Queens has a dorm on campus. Hunter, if you get into Macaulay, Hunter actually has free housing the first 2 years. So total cost will also include transportation, will also include books and supplies. So usually it's a few $1,000s in addition to tuition. Next question. Oh, I got a nice compliment. Thank you. Next question, Francis. Someone's asking if they came late, are they able to view this recording after? I don't know how you're proceeding with that. Okay. I guess you want to reach out to Francis. She can let you know if the recording is available. So it's been a pleasure. Oh, I see another question here. Is it better to go to a SUNY or CUNY? As there's an argument out there that SUNYs are better. I don't think SUNYs are better. I think for some rankings, they might be higher ranked, especially certain departments. But Macaulay Honors College especially is very prestigious, and Hunter has some things they're very known for. Baruch is very known for business. So I wouldn't say that SUNY is automatically more impressive than CUNY at all. Next. Okay, what if you're denied early action? Should you apply through the regular application? So if you're denied an early action, you're done with that school. It's only if you're deferred that you have a chance in the regular decision pool. Question, what if I want to join the FBI? It's a great question. I would say look at John Jay. Criminal justice is their specialty. Also, if you go to schools in the Washington, D.C. area, you might be able to have access to internships during the school year with the FBI or other law organizations in Washington, D.C. Question, do New York State Regents hold weight for out-of-state colleges? Not as much as the actual letter grade that you get in the class at the end of the year. Okay. Is there anything you could do for senior year for resume as week? I would say don't join 7 different activities, maybe join 1 or 2. Having a job is something that impresses any year. But I would say it's going to be hard to all of a sudden join 10 different things. They'll see through that, but maybe join a couple and see if you want to get a job. If you want to do research, for example, senior year, sometimes places don't open research until then. If you want to do community service, it's never too late to help out the community. Colleges aren't looking for kids to get involved in community service in Europe, Central America, Africa, Asia. They're more impressed by kids who do it in their own backyard. So help out in New York City, that'll impress them more than going abroad when it comes to community service. Okay. So which CUNYs are good for engineering? City College is especially known for engineering. Other CUNYs might have engineering aspects, but City especially is renowned for it. Do you think taking a pre-college course at a certain college will increase your chances of admission? That's a great question. So for some schools that track demonstrated interest, that's a helpful thing to do. Barnard or Brandeis, for example, taking their pre-college course is helpful. For other schools, it doesn't matter as much. Question about joining the Marines or the military. So there are the service academies. You could apply for West Point, for the Navy, for the Air Force. These are competitive programs. If you're looking for the specific military schools, the 4 years, and then go into the service industry after, unless you want to just enlist right away, that's separate. Then if you want to go to the service academies for 4 years. Okay, so if I want to be a physical therapist, which college should I look at? That's a great question. Not many colleges will necessarily have an undergraduate degree in physical therapy. It might be more prominent with graduate schools. And as an undergrad, you might do some internships with physical therapists. So I don't want you to feel like there's a certain college you have to go to for physical therapy. What are some impressive things I may want to do if I am interested in pursuing a career in law? So I would say definitely joining student organizations on campus that pertain to your interests, maybe an academic team like a Model UN on a campus, a mock trial, maybe Model Congress where there's public speaking as part of it. And I would say that graduate schools, just like colleges, are impressed with people who engage in service. Okay. What are the requirements for West Point? Very competitive. You also have to have a Congress member's letter. So to look at those, it's pretty competitive for admission. Should my student take college now and AP courses, or is there one pathway that'll have a larger benefit when applying or attending colleges? And I know that some schools do not accept college now credits. So here's the thing. The more competitive schools you're applying to are going to expect you to maximize your school's offerings. So if a college admission office has a very low admit rate, they're expecting you to take the more demanding courses that are offered at your school. If a school isn't as highly selective, then the offerings that you're going to take at your high school won't matter as much as meeting the graduation requirements. Okay, what does early action mean? Okay, I'm going to put it this way. Early action, you're dating. Early decision, you're ready to commit to marriage. So early action means you can apply to multiple schools at the same time to have an earlier deadline. Early decision means you're only applying to one school that has an earlier deadline that you know you want to go to the most. Do individual colleges have special admission requirements like having taken calculus at high school beyond general subjects high school requires for graduation? So the more selective schools will look to see that you're maximizing what your school has to offer. If you're applying to a highly selective engineering or business school, they like to see people in the highest level mathematics that your school requires, whether it's Calc AB or BC or multivariable calculus. So the idea is looking to see that you're maximizing what's out there at your school. Okay. What do I do if I want to major in computer science or STEM? So in the high school level, do as well as you can in all your classes. Once you're in college, you can declare a computer science, mathematics, biochem, or physics major. It's not like a direct path from high school to there. I'll tell you, there are some majors that might be more gender related. What do I mean? It might be more competitive to apply to economics or computer science being male, because being female means you're a bit more underrepresented. Same with engineering, same with business. Applying for nursing as a male is more underrepresented as well. So it kind of balances out in different realms. Okay, so I'm not seeing any more questions here. So it was a pleasure speaking to you guys tonight, answering your questions. And Francis, if there's any last questions you have for me or anything you want me to address, let me know. Okay, so wishing you all a good night. Best of luck with the admission process. It was a pleasure speaking with you guys, and hang in there. Everything's going to be fine. Students tend to end up at the right place. And if you have to transfer after a year, that's okay. Also, college is not a prison sentence. It's meant to be, you go for a semester or a year. If you love it, you stay for 4 years. If you transfer, you transfer. But I wish you the best of luck in high school. Work to your fullest abilities, realize your potential. And I think things will work out for you guys. Okay, have a great night.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. We're closing up. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.